video, we are going to study class 7th history lesson 4 of NCERT book, The Mughal Empire. And students, now who were Mughals? The Mughals were the descendants of two great lineages. From their mother's side, they were the descendants of Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan ruled over Mongol tribes, China and Central Asia. And from their father's side, Mughals were descendants of Timur. Timur ruled over Iran, Iraq and modern-day Turkey. Now what is this father's side and mother's side? Let's have a look. Look at this family tree of Babur. The initial ruler was Timur, and then came Prince Miran Shah, then Prince Sultan Muhammad, then Sultan Abu Sayyid, and then Prince Umar Sheikh Mirza, and then came Babur. And with the beginning of the rule of Babur, we say Mughal rule started in India. So, from their father's side, Mughals are the descendants of Timur, and similarly, from their mother's side, they were the descendants of Genghis Khan. But you know, students, Mughals always emphasized their Timurid and not Mongol descent. That means they never liked themselves to be associated with Genghis Khan, rulers who ruled over the Indian subcontinent. The first came Babur. He ruled from 1526 to 1530 Common Era, and then came Humayun, who ruled from 1530 to 1540 CE. If you remember, children, in the last chapter we studied that after Humayun, for some time period, Sher Shah Suri came to power and then his son. But Humayun was again able to regain his old position and he came to power in 1555 again, and he ruled for one more year. Then came Akbar, he ruled from 1556 to 1605. Then came Jahangir, and then Shah Jahan, and then Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb was the last powerful Mughal ruler. There were many other Mughal rulers after Aurangzeb. The last one was Bahadur Shah Zafar, about whom we are going to read in class 8th. So let's start with Babur. He succeeded to the throne of Ferghana in the year 1495 when he was just 12 years old. Ferghana is in Uzbekistan, but he faced rebellion from his own relatives. He was forced to leave his ancestral throne due to the invasion of another Mongol group, the Uzbeks. And he kept on moving for a lot of years and finally seized Kabul in the year 1504. In 1526 Common Era, he defeated the Sultan of Delhi, Ibrahim Lodi, at the first battle of Panipat, and he captured Delhi and Agra. And if you remember, children, Ibrahim Lodi was the last ruler of the Delhi Sultanate, and after he got defeated, Delhi Sultanate came to an end. And then Babur founded Mughal Empire. So Mughal Empire starts with the rule of Babur. Dear children, if you want some more information on various Mughal emperors, then you can go through table 1. It is very easy to understand. Now here is the next topic. How was the relationship of Mughals with other rulers? Mughals constantly campaigned or fought against those rulers who refused to accept their supremacy. Some Indian rulers joined Mughals voluntarily, that means by their own wish. Some of the Rajput rulers married their daughters into Mughal families. For example, you must have heard the name of Jodhabai. She was the daughter of Rajput ruler of Amber. She got married to Akbar, and then they had a son called Jahangir. And Jahangir was also married to a Rajput princess who was the daughter of Rajput ruler of Marwar. And in return, many of the Rajputs received high positions in Mughal court like Mansabdars or they became Subedars. The best part of Mughal rule was that even the defeated rulers were treated honorably by Mughals. If they agreed to accept Mughal supremacy, then they were given their land back as assignments. That means now those defeated rulers will be ruling their kingdom again, but now they have to collect taxes and they have to give it to the Mughals, and they will always be under Mughal supremacy. Now, who were Mansabdars? Those who joined Mughal service were appointed as Mansabdars. All Mansabdars had a position or rank, also known as Mansab. Mansabs were appointed from diverse backgrounds, example Turkish, Irani, Afghans, Rajputs, Marathas, etc. Okay, under Mansabdari system, students, every Mansabdar had a fixed rank, salary and some military responsibility. And this rank and salary was fixed to a numerical value called Zat. The higher noble's position and salary. So if some noble had a Zat of 5,000, his position, his rank, his salary was higher than that of the one whose Zat was 1,000. And every civil and military officer was given a Mansab. That means any military commander or any revenue officer or any important minister had a Mansab. But cooks, soldiers, the people, that means the people with lower ranks did not have Mansab. And in Akbar's reign, there were 29 Mansabdars with a rank of 5,000 Zat. This is the highest during Akbar's reign. Now, here are the functions of Mansabdars. Every Mansabdar was required to maintain a specific number of Savar or cavalrymen, that means Ghur Savar, to increase the military strength of the ruler. And every Mansabdar received a land which was also called as Jagir. Mansabdars did not settle on this land or they did not rule over this land. Rather, they served in some other part of the country and lived somewhere else. So then why was this land given? This land was given so that they can collect revenue from this Jagir, and from this revenue or tax, they will be paying to their soldiers, and this revenue will also be their salary. And these Jagirs were carefully assessed so that whatever a Mansabdar is collecting as revenue should be roughly equal to his salary. That means he should not be collecting more or less than his salary. Now children, Akbar had a very knowledgeable revenue minister of finance. Total Mal carried out a careful survey of crop yields or crop production for a period of 10 years, and on the basis of this data that he collected, tax was fixed for each crop in cash. Now, the entire area under Akbar was divided into various revenue circles. Each revenue circle had its own set of revenue rates, and these rates were different for different crops. So let's say there are two areas, area A and area B, and in both the areas wheat is grown. So it is possible that both the areas will have different tax rates for the same crop. And let's say in the area A, wheat as well as rice is grown. So both the crops will have different tax rates. And this entire revenue system was called as Zabt. Children, an interesting fact here is that during Aurangzeb's reign, the number of Mansabdars increased to 79. Since there was such large number of Mansabdars, they had to wait for a long time before they could get a Jagir. That means the land from which they could collect revenue. And the actual revenue collected from Jagir was mostly less than the assessed or granted or calculated sum. As a result, the Jagirdars or Mansabdars, they started collecting as much revenue as possible. That means that they started cheating the people. And Aurangzeb, he was not able to control all this, and thus during his rule, the peasants, the small people, the small farmers, they suffered a lot. Now next topic is Zamindars and Zabt. Okay, Zamindar means lord of the land or a landlord. Mughals used the term Zamindars to describe all the intermediaries or middlemen, whether they were the local headmen of the village or they were a powerful chieftain. Being an intermediary or a middleman meant that they were a link between the peasants and the Mughals. So they collected taxes from the peasants and gave part of it to the Mughals' revenue department. But in some areas, Zamindars exercised a great deal of power. And in case the Mughal administrators were exploitative, then they, along with the peasants, rebelled against the Mughal authority. And these peasant revolts became very common during the end of the 17th century, that means during Aurangzeb's reign. Now the next topic is Subedar and Suba. Abul Fazl, in his book Akbarnama, explained that Mughal Empire was divided into various provinces or areas, also known as Subas. Each Suba was governed by a Subedar, also known as a governor. A Subedar lived in his area and he maintained law and order in that area. He ruled over it and he maintained military also to support the king. But Subedar did not work all alone. He was supported by many other officers for maintenance of law and order. For example, Diwan, Bakshi, Sadr, Faujdar and Kotwal. Under Delhi Sultanate, the term that was used for land was Ikta, and under Mughal Empire, the land was called as a Jagir and a Suba. The governor of Ikta was called as Iktadar or Mukti. The governor of a Jagir was called as Jagirdar or Mansabdar. The governor of Suba was called as Subedar. Now, let's understand their functions. Iktadar, Mansabdar, Subedar, they all had some similar functions. They all collected taxes from their land. They all paid salaries to the soldiers that they maintained from this tax that they have collected. And this Iktadar and Subedar, they were also responsible for maintaining law and order, for ruling over their land. But Mansabdar, he did not have the responsibility to administer the land. He only collected taxes and paid salaries to the soldiers. And regarding the residents, Iktadar, he lived inside the Ikta that he ruled and he maintained law and order in that Ikta. In Mansabdar, he never lived in a Jagir, in his Jagir, rather he lived somewhere else. He served some other area, but he just collected tax from his Jagir so that he could pay salary to his soldiers and he could keep salary for himself as well. Subedar, he also lived in his Suba and maintained law and order. Now children, Abul Fazl, he was a very close friend of Akbar and he worked in Akbar's court as well. He was given the responsibility of writing the history of Akbar's rule. So he wrote Akbar Nama. It was a 3-volume history of Akbar's rule. So volume 1 dealt with Akbar's ancestors. In volume 2, he recorded the events of Akbar's reign. In volume 3, he dealt with a lot of issues, and volume 3 was also known as N.A. Akbari. So it dealt with Akbar's administration, his household, army, revenues, geography of his empire, traditions and cultures of people living in India, and statistical details, that means data about crops, yields, prices, wages, and revenues. Okay, so children, Akbar was famous not only because he was a great emperor or he ruled a big, huge empire, rather he was famous also because of his views on religion. Akbar started religious discussions when he was at Fatehpur Sikri in 1570s with religious scholars of various religions like ulama, Brahmins, Jesuit priests, Zoroastrians, and the place where these discussions took place is called as Ibadat Khana. Now, while having these discussions with various religious scholars, he realized that these people who emphasize ritual and dogma were often bigots. Now, this means what? These religious scholars, these ulama, Brahmins or priests, whenever they made some statement, they never wanted their statements to be questioned by anyone. So he called such people bigots. That means they were intolerant of religious beliefs of other people. And for such people, their teachings could only create division or disharmony in the society. So Akbar developed a new idea which was called as Sulh-e-Kul. Yeah, that means universal peace. So this idea focused on tolerance, honesty, justice, and peace. And his friend Abul Fazl, he helped Akbar in framing vision of governance around this idea.